Hey everyone, so I got a request to do a little bit of a video about cargo. So this video will talk about cargo in the game Airlines Manager Tycoon. We'll talk a little bit about how to start out your cargo on your airline, how to get cargo on your airplanes, how to configure them, a little bit about running a cargo airline versus a passenger airline, and also a little bit about cargo research and cargo pricing. So anyway, cargo is kind of like this mystery that you don't start the game with the ability to do cargo. And in fact, the game designers tell you that you should not go into cargo until you've kind of learned the basics of the rest of the game, which is true. You should really sort of figure out how to run the passenger side before you really venture into cargo, because it's a little bit different. But once you kind of figure it out, it's not too complicated. I will say that I'm not running an all cargo airline, and so I don't have that much to say about it. And but I can certainly get people started just with some initial thoughts. So anyway, first, like, how do you actually research cargo? So that's pretty simple. If you just tap your R&D button and go to research and development, it'll be in this general section. So tap general, and in this first section, you see that crate against the green background. That's your cargo research. So I've obviously already researched it. I believe it costs 50 million R&D dollars to research, so it's not terribly expensive. And once you finish the research on cargo access, it will open up a couple of things. It'll open up the cargo research tree, this button down here at the bottom left. And it'll also unlock cargo aircraft and then allow you to fly cargo on your routes. So let's talk about cargo planes. So you can, in the game, purchase cargo only aircraft. So there's a pretty large variety of aircraft that haul only cargo. It's only showing one here because it's referencing one of my routes, but if I open it up to any route, there's a lot of options ranging from very small ones like this Embraer $11 million option all the way up to a Boeing 747-8F designation, which I believe is for freighter, which is a $352 million cargo airplane. So you could buy just a normal all cargo airplane if you were going to run an all cargo airline. I am not running all cargo, and so the alternative option is that you can actually configure your airplanes to carry cargo along with your passengers. So if, for example, you're flying Airbus 380s and when you're purchasing an Airbus 380, you can actually see you have sliders for economy, business, and first, but also cargo. You know, the fewer passengers you carry, the more room you'll have for cargo. So if you, for example, have no passengers, you can actually carry up to 89 tons of cargo on an A380. And it's worth noting that the more passengers, so if you have more economy, you're not going to have as much room for cargo. It's a mass thing. The more weight you're carrying, so more bodies means more weight. That means you can carry less cargo. So that's how you would configure for cargo. And generally speaking, you know, it doesn't really matter how you configure the airplane. You're always going to have a little bit of room for some cargo, even if you take up all the seats. You max up 853 economy seats. But interestingly, if I did an all first class configuration, it's only 200 first class customers. You see it, like, there's a ton of room for cargo still. It's because there's fewer people on board. So there's more payload weight available for cargo. And you can see that green payload bar moving up and down when I move this up and down, right? So that's how you would configure for cargo. Now, it's worth noting that you can't do this with a leased airplane. So only when you purchase airplanes do you have this ability to configure for cargo. So only when you start buying airplanes are you going to have this ability. If you go to leased, you just can't change the cargo configuration. So that's all you can say about that. There's just nothing else you can do about it. So that's how you get an airplane for cargo. Now, if you read through the help documentation for the game, they'll tell you that generally all cargo airlines will not make as much money as passenger airlines. And I think that's going to generally be true. I mean, you're just never going to make as much revenue per unit of cargo as you can for, say, an economy customer flying a long haul route. So that's just kind of the case. They do tell you, though, that if you run cargo, you do get a tax credit of some sort. I don't really know how the mechanics work for this, but if I go to this financial summary page and I calculate my tax, you can see that there's a cargo bonus here. So somehow my cargo operations are reducing my tax liability. I just don't know exactly how the calculation works. So you're going to have to write to the developers about that if you want to know more about it. But I am paying a fair amount of tax, $70 million, almost $80 million a week right now, and it's nice to have a little bit of credit for that against my taxes. Let's talk a little bit about cargo pricing, I guess. So, pricing your cargo works pretty much the same as pricing your passengers. I will note that it'll depend on how you configure your airplanes, but generally speaking, you're probably going to have more capacity to carry cargo than you actually have demand for cargo, at least in the early days of starting your cargo. So like if I look at some of the Korean routes like LAX, KWJ, there's only 20 tons of demand on this route. Part of that is because I've set the price pretty high. And I do that because, sometimes you can sacrifice a little bit of demand to get a higher revenue, just because of the price inelasticity. But here, I've set the price at $5,090. That's actually a little bit above the recommended price. And I did that just because I realized that you could raise the price a little higher than the recommended price and still get this 20 tons of demand. But I have the ability to run quite a lot more than the 20 tons, and that's why I'm getting a negative number there. But that's okay. You just kind of have to experiment with the pricing and figure out what works the best for you. But generally speaking, obviously, you want to maximize your revenue. So it just prices pretty similarly to passengers. But with passengers, I never like to be in negative demand because I think it's just better to fill all the seats if you can. But with cargo, it's just a little bit different, at least until you have some time to research cargo research, which let's talk about cargo research now. So if I close all this and you go to R&D, there is cargo research over here. Now, there's quite a few options. You can research new cargo airplanes, which, great. I don't know that it's really all that necessary to research them, but if you feel like you want one of these planes, this is where you would find them. But really, what's more interesting to talk about here is these options on the right, which basically impact, what do they call it, offer attractiveness and delivery speed. And both of these basically just have a positive impact on your cargo demand. So the more you research and implement these services, the higher your cargo demand is going to be. Now, there's sort of the top option and the bottom option. The top option, so it says delivery speed plus 10, which is a relatively small number, honestly. The bottom option would have a bigger impact on delivery speed, but it also impacts passenger demand. And actually, it's going to have a negative impact on passenger demand. I'll show you where you can find this. So if I close this again and I go to R&D services, and go to commercial support. So commercial support is really kind of like the, I think internal management might have to do with cargo too, as well. Let's check. Yeah, it does have a little bit to do with cargo too. So here you can see, so on ground safety, I don't know why it's showing it in French, but it is. If I go to the left one, it's improving the attractiveness of offer by +10, but not impacting passenger demand. But if you look to the right, it will, you have a much bigger impact on the attractiveness of your offer, but it does negatively impact passenger demand a little bit. It's not a huge number on the negative passenger demand, but it is negative. So that's just something to be aware of, that if you're going to do an all cargo airline, then you would definitely want to go to the right because you don't care about passenger demand. But if you're running passengers and cargo, then you're going to want to think a little bit about how you balance these traits. You can improve passenger demand through staffing. There's a tree in staffing that allows you to increase passenger demand. So you could theoretically offset the negative demand here by hiring some staffing for passenger demand, but that's obviously introducing a little bit of complexity, which not everybody may be into. As you go farther down these trees, the passenger demand impacts get quite a bit larger. At the bottom here, it's -18, so that would really involve hiring a lot of staff to counteract that. So just something to be aware of. So for now, because I am running passengers, I'm only going to the left here because I don't want that negative passenger demand. I'm much more dependent on the revenue for my passengers than I am for my cargo. And I haven't done all the cargo researches yet, so I haven't yet seen how high we can get cargo demand just going to the left branch. But that's how you would try to increase your cargo demand through research. So hopefully that answers some questions about cargo. If you have more questions, feel free to comment in the comment box below. Otherwise, please like or subscribe if you enjoyed this video. Thanks.